Hi, this is Anne from Adair-Major Consulting. If you're looking to make key metrics pop and tell a clear story of your data, you're in the right place. Today, we're going to deep dive into one of Power BI's most essential visualizations, the cards. There's three kinds of cards. There is the big number tile or the single valued card, and that lets you showcase a value. Then there's the multi-row card. So that lets you put multiple different fields on the same visualization, though you're really limited in how you can display that and customize what it looks like. Then there's the most recent card visualization, which Microsoft have really intuitively called Card New. In Card New, which I'm just going to call the card visual from now, you're really able to customize what it looks like. The padding, the border, the rows, the shapes, the order, everything. What's great is that Power BI is still improving on the new card visual, with features added as recently as March 2025. So today we're going to use those latest updates as we walk through 4 hands-on examples. My goal is to show you exactly how to implement these cards in your reports right now, making them intuitive and effective for both you and your end users. In our first example today, we're going to create a dynamic summary of sales. Let's start with adding our main data field, sales value. I like to add a title to my visualizations. I'll call it sales. And you can see here, I'm able to update the font and size to make that stand out. I can also use the same format across other titles to add consistency to my report. The main number that we're trying to highlight in our report is the call out value. This is the central number here. And we're able to, again, customize the font and size. Reference labels are a brand new feature within Power BI for these new card visuals. What they are is fantastic for adding context to our main callout value. So we find reference labels in the format field and then add the data fields that we also want to display. You'll see that it comes in as a separate section underneath. In the reference labels, the context that we want to add to sales is the order number. Now, this is going to default to show our first order number, but if I change the summarization to count, then it'll show me the number of orders. Then I'm going to add in our price and the actual profit number. To make these much clearer, you can rename each one. In the formatting pane under series, simply select each label one at a time, change the title option to custom, and then add in the new name that you want to see for that value. Now for a great feature, which is details, where it lets us add even more context to our reference labels. So in this case, I want to showcase the profit margin beside the profit figure. And by using reference labels, I can do that by turning on the details for this series. Details allow for more nuanced information to be shown. Since details don't have their own label, I like to format them a little bit differently. In this case, I'm going to make the text smaller, add a highlight, and actually add a little bit of transparency so it's not so bold. This creates a really nice visual hierarchy, adding the extra information without cluttering the card. Once we've built out a card with its callout value, its reference labels, and then even some detail, this is already a million times better than previous iterations and versions, right? But what if we want to take it to the next level? Something that's new within cards is this categories. And what I love about this categories is that we can take the visualization that we have now and then, for example, easily add in categories. Now, in this case, my category is called category, but that's just the category of the items sold. but you'll see, oh, it's really not made it very pretty. In this particular layout, we can kind of resize it a little bit, and that helps an awful lot. This is one way of viewing it. But you'll also see on the right-hand side, now that we've added categories, are small multiples. The small multiple layout and header options have become available. And this is where we get to change it. So single column is what we're looking at. But what if it was single row? There's some small differences between the style. So you can have tables or cards, and cards I like. There's a little gap between the two. Style of cards. Okay. Small multiple headers then is this piece at the top, right, where we've got that category. Now, in a really similar way to reference labels, we were able to customize them one by one, and we can do the exact same or apply changes to do them all. Then in the same as we had for other values, we can change the color of the font. So I'm actually going to make it this very light gray, and then make the background this turquoise color we use. Wow, that looks a lot better than it did, right? So we looked at before on the data, the fact that you could avoid writing measures by using these preset summarizations, which are really handy. But there's another one that's a little bit harder to find. So if I right click on the actual field itself, I still see all of those same options, but I also see show value as. Now, again, really great if you're trying to avoid having to write new measures. I can now really quickly, at a click of a button, change those values to show me the percentage they are of the overall grand value, or the overall grand total. I'm going to change that back because that's not what we wanted for this one, but I think that's a really handy tip to know. In our second example, I've called it key facts. And what this is we're going to take a number of different fields and put them in one single visualization, not unsimilar to the multi-row, except with the new card visual, we're really able to customize what that looks like. Okay, so I've added in 3 different fields here: profit, customer name, and product name. Now, I'm going to leave the total profit amount as it is, but for first customer, instead of summarizing it by showing me the first, I'm going to do a count. So a distinct count of customers. And then the same with a distinct count of, product names. So what that is showing me is my total profit amount, but then the distinct count means unique values. So there's 6 unique customer names and 7 unique product names. So there's 6 customers have bought from us and 7 types of products have been bought, is what we can infer from that. Now, I'm going to change that around using some of the settings that actually we saw before. So in layout, making it a single column instead, making that a little bit more narrow. And then giving it a title. And adding in the divider. Don't need a subtitle, but now if I place that underneath the previous one, there you go. Looks right at home. You can still play around with that a little bit. I would make that call out values a little bit smaller, and maybe 35, and pop them in the middle. Similarly, down in the card section, you might change that to rounded rectangles, make them a little bit more bouncy, and reducing the amount of curve there. There we go. That's a really quick example, but The idea is to compare that against the multi-row, where we're achieving the same thing, but by using the new visualization, we're able to make it look a lot nicer. In our third example, we're going to use the top end feature in Power BI to highlight our number one customer. Also in this example, we're going to make it clickable and interactive so that we can use some of the options that are supplied within new cards to be able to let our user interact with our reports directly. So what we're going to do is use the filters to be able to show the top N. Now, what does top N mean? Top N is where we automatically filter out based on a value to only show the top number of results that are within that filter. So what I'm going to do is showcase who our top client is or our top customer is, looking at it by number of sales. So if I put in the customer name, it's just going to show me whichever customer name comes in first. So if I put in customer name, whichever customer name comes first. Now, in the filters pane on the right is where we're going to do the magic. So in the filters pane, I'm going to look at filters. I'm going to look at filters on this visual, and then I'm going to tell it I want to filter the customer's name and change the filter type to top N, so the top number. Top 1 by value, so based on the sales amount. So the sum of the sales. Then when I say apply filter, that will automatically change to the customer that had the highest sales amount. So following that, let's do a little bit of formatting. So again, keeping it consistent. So adding in a title. I'm going to make that call out value a little bit smaller. Down here, because it's a little bit longer, I'm going to turn on text wrap. So that looks good. Make it a little bit smaller. Now for the call out value, we obviously want to take off customer name like that. Now, in a similar way that we use the reference labels down here, I want to do something similar to give me more information about that customer itself. So if I add in the amount sales, what we're looking to do now is change that. So for our reference label, let's make that a little bit more intuitive in its name. So sum of sales amount, changing from field name over to custom name, and then calling it total sales. So that's the key information. So what I want to do now is make it so that I have the option to view more information about that customer. Now, the way I would do that is with this selected, I would add a second data point. And for this, I'm going to say that they are what type of customer are they, for example? So what's the segment? By adding segment, by adding that second data field in here, what it does is adds a second card, really similar to what we did with the key facts. So it just says corporate on that. Call out values. They're too big for this example. There we go. Down to 30. So on this second card, we're saying, right, the corporate client. What other reference information provides good context about them as a client? Into reference labels, I'm going to change the series from customer name to first segment and add in some key information. So what about what region are they from? What city? Then perhaps the order numbers and the quantity. So that's a sum. We want to keep that as sum, but for first order number, don't want the first. We want count of distinct. So 8 orders, and we have the city, North America, as the region. So if I quickly run through these, I can update them. And then maybe to give it some consistency, I might change the color of those altogether. So let's be honest, it doesn't look great. It doesn't make that look particularly intuitive that that's information about that client at the moment. But this is where the magic comes, right? We're going to make it interactive. So back up into layout, where we have single row, we have cards. What if I change that to max cards shown down to 1? So if I change that max cards to show only 1, we get a scroll bar down the bottom. But in the settings, under layout, I have an overflow option. And instead of continuous scroll, I can say paginated. And we get this little arrow on the right. And we can flick between the two. I'll make that a little bit smaller. Now, that arrow can be hard to spot, and there isn't an option to change the size of it. But you remember that we had accent bars down in cards. So if I turn that accent bar on, you can see I get this really thin black line there. But what if I swap that over to the right, except I don't want to swap it to the right yet. I want to make sure that apply settings to the series, just the customer name. And now I swap that to the right. Be consistent with my color and make it a little bit thicker so it's quite clear and obvious there. So that helps draw attention to that side. But what about on the other side? We've just got that really thin black line. Back up to the series, changing that to the segment and applying exactly the same. Where we had on the right, let's keep it on the left. Same color, same width. There you go. So you can see you've got key information, really high level. And when I click it over, it tells me a little bit about them as a client. In our fourth and final example today, I'm going to show you something that I put in most client reports. Using the card feature to easily showcase the date range that is in scope of that report, which really provides a lot of context for our end customer. In our last visualization, we're going to use it to showcase what range of data do we have. So what is the earliest data and what is the latest data? Now, there's two ways of doing this depending on how your data is set up. One is if you've got a dynamic date table, which is already showing you the earliest to the latest dates, that will work. Or equally, if you've got a main date column that represents how long the data is from, that also can work. It depends exactly on what your data is. So I'm just going to do it on order date today. Now, what you might find is sometimes when you're adding the same column in twice, it likes to do it on the right hand side and not the hover over. So just adding in order data twice. And because that's the same summarization, it's only showing me it once. But if I change that one to latest, you've now got an earliest and a latest. Using the layout options that we've looked at already in other examples, we can make that a single column, cards, max shown 2, then making it much, much smaller. This is just metadata about your report itself, not key numbers. So make that a little bit smaller down in the corner. Now this has got the exact dates. For me, I don't need that. You might already just have month and year that you've added in, but because I've not used my date table, I've used the actual order date from my fact table. And if I go to the callout values and apply settings to series, when I narrow it down to one single series, you'll see it comes up with format code. And in here, it's recognized that it's a date and it's giving me options. So what about if I want to have year date? And then up to title. There you go. And you can pop that in the corner of any report page to help give context to what date range the user is looking at, which can be really important especially if you're looking at anything that's year to date or month to date, knowing exactly when it was last refreshed, what data is this up till. There are other ways of doing this that it will depend on what your exact data structure is, but this is a really quick and easy way if it makes sense for your data. And there you have it. You can create professional dynamic cards to make your data pop. To make sure that you don't miss out on more practical code-free tutorials that will continue to level up your Power BI skills, make sure that you subscribe. And let me know in the comments which card design you're going to try first. Also, if you're ready to make your reports even more interactive, the next video is right here. It's my tutorial on making a colorful and dynamic slicer. Of course, code-free.